something. I think the problem with when you go into a new ecosystem is, you're super pumped up to do a lot of different things, but if you kind of don't understand like the ecosystem or the technology, you kind of get into like a position where you're like, really good at like uploading data or sending transactions, but you have no idea how to like make a process, for example. So yeah, this workshop, we're kind of going to do like an introduction to Arweave, then into Arweave's fundamentals. Then we're going to build a dApp. Then we're going to do an introduction to AO and AO's fundamentals, and then building a dApp. So yes. Right then, so who am I? My name is Lorimer Jenkins. I'm an engineering partner at AO Ventures, and previously I was a fellow at Community Labs where I built Authent.io. So yeah, I've kind of been where you guys are now. I've been in an incubator before, and yeah, follow me on Twitter. It's Lorimer_Jenkins. So what are we going to achieve in this module? So yeah, what Arweave is and how it works, as well as what we can do with Arweave and an understanding of what the permaweb is, how it works, and what we can do with it. Also, a starting point where we can actually get involved with the ecosystem. So Arweave was founded in 2017 by Sam Williams with a mission to make permanent low-cost data storage a reality. Before that, like there has never really been a project like Arweave about. Traditionally, you kind of store things on like AWS, on Cloudflare, but Arweave kind of is very different in that sense. We want permanent data, and in this workshop, you're going to be able to see what you can actually do with it. And fun fact, it was actually initially created to store newspaper articles. There was no like AO ecosystem or smart contract languages when Arweave was first made. So let's go. So Arweave works on something called proof of access. It's very, very different to something like Bitcoin, where it's proof of work. So instead of like proving you can solve different challenges, you basically are trying to prove how many replications of data sets there is in Arweave. This is pretty powerful because if you did something like, you just had multiple different nodes storing like different portions of the network, you would get into a position where it's not really censorship resistant. You could have something where like, 5% of the network is being held by one node and then 95% is being held by another. And that would be like really annoying, because if you had 5% on one node and that node went down, all of that data that was stored on that one node would be like gone. So we kind of don't want to get in a position where, some data or some nodes are more valuable than others. So the way proof of access really comes into play is it's super censorship resistant. So even if one node goes down, lots of other nodes will have lots of different replications of that data. And yeah, so once you kind of have that, you have like a decentralized pool of data, right? So you have lots of different nodes storing lots of different replications of the data set, so Arweave. But you kind of want it so that all of these replications of each set are like, super, super powerful. So with that, you need like a protocol called Wildfire. So Wildfire basically is a way so you can take like multiple different nodes and have them incentivized to share the data with each other. This is quite cool because, you can get in a position where you have lots and lots of different nodes that are all incentivized to like store multiple data sets, but also the same set. So you don't have like some nodes that only store like images of NFTs. You don't have some nodes that only store like AO data. All of the different nodes store the same replication of each data set, are all incentivized to do so, but then also are incentivized to keep multiple sets of that data. So once we have that, we then have this like decentralized lump of data. But you're kind of thinking like, how do I access it? In other ecosystems, you'd have to basically download like a whole node. You'd have to run a full node to get access to this data, which is kind of not really what you want to do. If you're like making a DEX, for example, and you're working in like in a front end browser, and you and like your back end is basically just a full Arweave node, it's like it'd be super expensive, be super slow, and you just wouldn't be able to do it. So basically, we need a way to access all of these different data sets. So for that, we need something called a gateway. So there is a gateway provider in Arweave called Ario, and they are very, very good at operating these things called gateways, which basically are just a way to access this data, but also index it. I want to make it pretty clear that nodes and gateways are very two separate things. You know, you can run an Arweave node that just stores replications of these data sets, but then you can also run something called a gateway, which basically indexes these data sets. So yeah, two very, very different things, but sometimes people, kind of get a bit confused between the two. So when you run a gateway, basically you want to know what kind of data the user is looking for. So the most basic way to do this is basically have your user specify like a transaction ID. So you guys, when you're building an app, basically lots of different SDKs use this in Arweave. If you upload data, if you send transactions, even like within AO processes, you get IDs. Then you can go to like gateways like arweave.net or gateway.io and specify like, oh, here is my transaction ID, and download the data from that gateway. So once we have a way to access the data and the data is all stored, we basically need to incentivize people to, continually store this data. It gets pretty expensive, as you can imagine, like all of these different nodes storing all of these different replications of the data set. So yeah, this is where something called the endowment comes in. Basically, when you go to upload data to Arweave, of course, you need to pay in Arweave tokens. So yeah, these Arweave tokens basically get sent to something called the endowment. And in its simplest form, it's basically just like think of it like a big lump of money. And basically these tokens that get paid into it over a certain period of time, they all get trickled into like incentivizing each of these nodes to store the data. So yeah, we call this the endowment, and basically all it is, big lump of money over a certain period of time gets trickled down into each node. So yeah, doing this, basically we kind of have like I think of it like a wheel. You upload data and pay a fee, it gets sent to the endowment, and then the wheel goes around as more people use the network and upload data to Arweave. That endowment can potentially pay for like forever all of this data in the wheel. Historically, over the last like 100-ish years, the cost to store data has always gone down. Back in the day, you'd have like a floppy disk. A floppy disk is like one of the world's worst ways you can like store data at scale. Then you had like USB drives, and then you had like really like hard drives and things like this, and then you have like today like huge data centers, right? So yeah, in Arweave, we're kind of also betting on that the cost of storage will also continuously going down, as the internet grows, which is great for us. So yeah, simply put, Arweave is a permanent pool of data. So we have all of these different nodes storing all of these different replications of this data set. They're all incentivized to do so because of this large pot of money called the endowment. Then we have a protocol that basically means that all of these nodes can get paid from the endowment to share this data, which basically continuously makes like a data set that's super strong and everyone kind of has, and multiple sets of it. So yeah. And we also have gateways where you can query this data. So you have like the endowment, then you have like all of the node operators, and then you have gateways where you can access it. So you may be thinking, that's pretty cool. So many people that I talk to, especially at conferences, they hear that, and it's like, they think of it like, okay, so if I store a picture of like family photos, like that's really cool. But, why would I ever want to build an app on it? Like, what's the point? We've got permanent data storage now, I'm not going to live forever. What's the point of it? So in the current internet, it is, as we know, not permanent and not decentralized. I kind of think of the internet as not really like one thing. The internet is really just like I kind of think of like as a philosophy, it's kind of here nor there. And all it really is when you get down to the technical like specs of it, it's just data centers like interacting with each other, much like how nodes do. You know, nodes use wildfire and get incentivized to, keep sharing this data and have one large set. And same as the internet, apart from there is no incentive to store replications of this set. And there's no incentive for any of these individual data centers to share this information. So, you have companies like, all of these big tech companies like Google and Facebook, those whole models are off data and they're not incentivized to share this data at all, which is really weird. So we get in a situation like we are now where, data disappears off the internet quite easily, which is very, very annoying. So Arweave kind of solves this with something called the permaweb, which is basically just a mixture of like permanence and World Wide Web. So yeah, this is where we can build applications that last forever and have a lot of benefits over the traditional internet. So when I'm thinking about dApps, dApps, what is a dApp? dApp is a decentralized application. So like a really good example of a Arweave dApp is something called Bazaar. So Bazaar is a NFT marketplace. So you can basically go onto this site. You can purchase NFTs. You can like other NFTs. You can, share them, upload your own, buy them. It's very, very cool. And many people like scoff at it because they're like, oh, well, why wouldn't I just go on OpenSea? Like what's the point, right? So yeah, if we kind of think of like a true dApp, a true decentralized application, what I like to do is kind of give like the example of FTX. So when FTX originally went down, a lot of FTX NFTs were actually like the actual like NFT data was stored via going to the ftx.com URL. And all of the data, of course, was stored in centralized providers like Cloudflare. Now, this was really, really funny. So people, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and pounds on these pictures. And as soon as, the company Kroll came in to start doing the bankruptcy procedures, they got rid of all of like the URL like redirects to Cloudflare. So, everyone woke up in the morning and went on like OpenSea and stuff, and there was just a broken URL of where their image was meant to be. Now, of course, they made the argument that, it was just the front end and stuff. But when you really think about it, like, was it just like the front end? How do people know that that actual image data wasn't changed? All it takes is like for one tiny pixel to be changed. And what's the point? You may as well just like have a screenshot, right? So with Bazaar, if you break this down into like multiple different chunks, each image is stored on Arweave. Each like even the website is stored on Arweave. Like all of the logos, all of like the data on how many people have liked it, the name, and funny enough, even like the URL. Like if we go back to what gateways are, a really cool thing you can do with like things like gateways is you can utilize them to improve current Web 2 technologies like domains. So we have something in Arweave called Arweave Name System, which basically is a way to take like a transaction ID and associate it with like a Web 2 domain. So what you could do, which was what Bazaar has done, is utilize ANS, get the Bazaar ANS name. So you go on bazaar.arweave.dev or any gateway for that matter, bazaar.gateway.io, whatever. And you can pull the whole of the Bazaar marketplace down to like the image data, the likes, like the way, the logic to log in, all of the contract IDs, all of the back end, even like everything is stored on Arweave, which is like super cool because you can get like super, super powerful websites and things. So instead of something like OpenSea, where most of this stuff is like stored on, like the picture of a mutant ape, most likely stored on Cloudflare, all of like the logic for the website. So if the developers of OpenSea, they wanted to open, like a new website for OpenSea, you as a user don't really have much power. You kind of just have to accept it. I kind of think back when I was younger and on like Snapchat, and all of my friends used to love the old Snapchat version. And then Snapchat just randomly one day updated it as they did and just filled it full of ads. And it made Snapchat like super unusable. It was super annoying. In Arweave, you don't really have to worry about that, from a user perspective, because a initial version of Bazaar will always be saved. via that transaction ID. Every gateway, due to Wildfire and the proof of access consensus, like I was saying earlier, incentivizes everyone to store multiple sets of Arweave, as well as incentivizes everyone to make sure there is one set that's shared about with everyone and have that consensus. So the transaction ID associated with Bazaar, you will always be able to pull back. So always old versions and things like that, you can pull back. So yeah, the permaweb right now is actually quite a young ecosystem. I think that poses like a very good opportunity. Even though Arweave has been going about since 2017, it's still quite young in terms of the permaweb. And yeah, it's like our job at the moment, and it's our opportunity to start building these different apps. Many people, I think, especially in Web3, they kind of get caught up in like, especially infrastructure, layer one infrastructure. Also layer two infrastructure. Always everyone's like, oh, I'm going to build the next blockchain and things like that, because of funding and things. But if you think of like the internet and you think of, okay, so we've got all of these different data centers interacting with each other. We've got Google that can index data. I personally wouldn't really want to run a data center. I think that'd be quite annoying. And that's kind of how I think like running like layer one infrastructure. When in Arweave, now we've got the opportunity to build the next social networks, the next Facebooks, the next applications. And these applications will be built on the permaweb. And the permaweb, like I was saying about the internet, is basically just like a philosophy. It's neither here nor there. Google doesn't own the internet. They're like a gateway to it, but they don't own all of these different data centers and things like that. So yeah, this is kind of where we are today. So how can you get involved? One thing that one of my old teachers used to tell me is like, you kind of like, I used to want to be an actor, right? And especially with acting, the more like experience you have, the better you are about like playing characters. I kind of think that's the same with like development. The more things you use, the kind of better you are making stuff, particularly with design as well. And I know development, design and development, two very different things. But when you're thinking about architecture and protocols, you kind of want to use as many of them as you can and figure out a really good baseline of your understanding of how dApps work. So yeah, in this ecosystem, highly recommend checking out cookies.arweave.dev. So yeah, here's some homework. Community Labs, and they might hate me for telling you this, recently launched a project called cookies.arweave.dev, which was basically a thing for people to, have cookies sent to them for free. So if you're feeling adventurous, I'd highly recommend trying to get your hands on some U. U is a token currently based on Warp, which is an old smart contract language on Arweave, which is now I think is going to be bridged over to AO. But yeah, go on to Permaswap, get some U, exchange it for some atomic cookies. And I really recommend you though, make sure, if there's one thing you do, try out some dApps in Arweave today. It will really, really help your understanding, especially with the things you can do here. So yeah, thanks very much. I think over the next workshops, we're actually gonna do a bit more of a hands-on thing, go over some like fundamentals on SDKs we can use, some of the wallets, ways to upload and retrieve data. It's quite, being such a young ecosystem, outdated docs and things. So going over like the best ways of doing things in the next workshop, as well as actually building something. I think we're going to build a dApp. Feel free to drop any comments in the chat as well. For more deeper technical comments, feel free to reach out to me in the Discord as well. Very much here to help and happy to help debug as well as if we don't know anything, I'm nearly 100% that we will know the team building the stuff. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorimer. Thanks for that overview. We're going to stay in the chat, as Lorimer said, to answer any questions that you guys might have. I've been posting some of the comments that you've been making to the questions section. And then next week, we're going to be hosting our first keynote presentation from one of the most important founders in the Arweave ecosystem. We haven't released who it is yet, but we will very soon. And then we're also going to be hosting an engineering office hours and a second technical workshop with Lorimer. So be sure to register for all those events once I send an email over to you guys. And once again, thank you guys for being here. And as always, we're excited to see how your projects develop and supporting you in building out the permanent web. So we'll see you in the chat.